Money changes everything. That's what my late husband Michael always said, usually while rolling his eyes at his parents' extravagant lifestyle. The designer clothes, the luxury cars, the country club memberships. Richard and Diana Porter had never met a status symbol they didn't like. I didn't judge them for it. When you've spent 40 years building a successful real estate empire, you earn the right to enjoy your wealth. But Michael and I chose a different path. Despite his trust fund and Harvard business degree, my husband preferred teaching high school mathematics. He said there was more satisfaction in shaping young minds than in accumulating zeros in a bank account. We lived comfortably but modestly in a beautiful old farmhouse on 5 acres, close enough to the city for my interior design business to thrive, but far enough out to give our daughter Lucy room to run and play. The guest house where Michael's grandfather used to live sat empty most of the year, used only for occasional visiting friends or holiday overflow. Michael's parents never approved of our lifestyle choices. They couldn't understand why their only son would waste his potential on teaching, or why I continued working after Lucy was born. But they kept their disapproval mostly subtle, limited to pointed comments about private schools we should consider or vacation homes we could afford if Michael would just join the family business. Then Michael got sick. The cancer moved fast, giving us barely 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. Those final weeks were a blur of hospital rooms and hospice nurses, of trying to stay strong for our 10-year-old daughter while my world crumbled around me. Richard and Diana flew in for the funeral, of course, but left quickly after, citing pressing business concerns. That was 2 years ago. Lucy and I found our new normal somehow. She threw herself into soccer and student council, while I expanded my design business to fill the endless empty hours. We had each other, and Michael's life insurance meant we didn't have to worry about money. It wasn't the life we planned, but we were making it work. Then came the call that changed everything. Elizabeth. Diana's voice on the phone was shaky, nothing like her usual confident tone. We need to talk. Something terrible has happened. The story spilled out in pieces. Federal investigations, fraudulent investments, Ponzi schemes Richard had gotten tangled up in, trying to maintain their lifestyle during the recession. Everything was gone, their homes, their cars, their reputation. They were facing bankruptcy and possible criminal charges. We have nowhere else to go, Diana sobbed. None of our friends will take us in. The scandal. Everyone's afraid of being associated with us. I thought of the empty guest house, sitting unused. Thought of how Michael, despite his eye rolling, had loved his parents. Thought of Lucy, who barely knew her grandparents but deserved a chance to build that relationship. You can stay with us, I heard myself say. The guest house is furnished and ready. You can stay as long as you need to get back on your feet. Diana's tears turned to relief, then excitement as she started planning the move. I pushed down my misgivings, telling myself this was what Michael would have wanted. Richard and Diana arrived a week later in a rented moving truck, their designer wardrobes and antique furniture a strange contrast to the modest guest house. Lucy was thrilled to have her grandparents around, especially when Diana started teaching her about fashion and makeup, things I'd never been particularly interested in. At first, everything seemed fine. Better than fine, even. Diana helped with the cooking, making elaborate meals that Lucy loved. Richard spent hours in the garden, seeming to find peace in the physical labor. They insisted on contributing what they could from their Social Security checks, though it barely covered groceries. But slowly, things began to change. It started with small comments about my parenting. Lucy's getting a bit chunky, don't you think? Diana would say, frowning at my daughter's healthy athlete's build. Maybe we should watch her portions. Then came the criticisms of my work. Honestly, Elizabeth, Richard sighed, looking around a newly completed client's living room. This is all rather pedestrian. Michael always said you have potential, but I bit my tongue, reminding myself they were struggling to adjust to their new circumstances. But the comments kept coming, growing bolder and more frequent. Lucy needs proper guidance, Diana announced one evening over dinner. A finishing school would do wonders. We know the perfect place in Switzerland. We can't afford that, I reminded her gently. And Lucy's happy at her current school. If you'd invest Michael's life insurance money properly, Richard chimed in, instead of letting it sit in those conservative funds. That money is for Lucy's college, I cut him off. It's not up for discussion. They backed off, but I could feel their disapproval radiating across the dinner table. Later that night, I heard them talking in the guest house, their voices carrying through the open window. "She's squandering Michael's legacy," Diana hissed. "Both his money and his daughter. Did you see what Lucy was wearing today? Looking more like Elizabeth every day, no Porter class at all." "We'll handle it," Richard assured her. "We just need time to implement the plan." I should have asked what plan they meant. Should have confronted them right then. But I told myself they were just venting, struggling to accept their new reality. After all, they were Lucy's only remaining grandparents. Family was family. Then Lucy started coming home from their house in tears. "Grandma says I'm not living up to the Porter name," she confided one night, curled up in my bed like she used to when she was little. "She says I'm too loud, too athletic, too common." I found Lucy's soccer uniform in the trash the next day, Diana claiming innocence but suggesting more ladylike pursuits might be appropriate. When Lucy made student council president, they barely acknowledged it, but spent an hour praising her cousin's debutante ball photos on social media. The final straw came during Lucy's piano recital. She'd been taking lessons for years, not because we pushed her, but because she genuinely loved music. She was playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, her face serene with concentration, when I heard Diana's stage whisper from the row behind me. She could have been truly gifted if Elizabeth hadn't indulged all those sports instead of focusing her properly. What a waste of Porter talent. Something in me snapped. I remembered Michael's passion for teaching, his disdain for family pressure and expectations. I thought of Lucy's bright spirit being slowly crushed under the weight of Porter class. That night, I went to clean the guest house while Richard and Diana were at one of their few remaining social engagements. Lucy was at a friend's house, and I needed to think. Maybe it was time to have a serious conversation about boundaries, about their role in our lives. I was dusting the bookshelf when I noticed something odd about the decorative clock, a tiny red light I'd never seen before. Looking closer, I realized with growing horror that it was a camera lens. My hands shaking, I started examining other decorative items. The vintage mirror in the hallway, the artsy pen holder on the desk, the air freshener in the living room. All cameras, all positioned to capture different angles of the main house. Then I found the laptop. Hidden in a false bottom of Richard's desk drawer, it contained hundreds of hours of footage. Me and Lucy in our kitchen. Us watching TV in the living room. Private conversations, intimate family moments, all recorded without our knowledge. But worse than the invasion of privacy were the audio files. Hours of Richard and Diana's running commentary as they watched us, critiquing every move, every word, every choice. "Look at how she's raising our granddaughter." Diana's voice dripped with disdain. "No discipline, no refinement." Michael would be horrified. "We need more evidence," Richard replied. "The way she's handling his money, her questionable parenting choices. Once we have enough documentation, any judge would grant us custody. The Porter name still carries weight, bankruptcy or not." "And the house?" Diana asked. "Oh, we'll get that too. Elizabeth won't be able to afford it once she's paying legal fees. Everything will be as it should be. Lucy raised properly as a Porter, and us back where we belong." I sat there in the growing darkness, my whole body cold with shock and rage. They weren't just judging us. They were gathering evidence, planning to take my daughter, my home, everything Michael had left us. As if on cue, headlights swept across the guest house windows. They were back early. I quickly replaced the laptop, my mind racing. I couldn't confront them yet, not without proof, not without a plan. But one thing was certain, this ended now. I heard their voices approaching the guest house and forced myself to breathe normally. Years of running my own business had taught me the value of keeping calm in a crisis. Right now, I needed to think strategically. "Elizabeth?" Diana called out, spotting me through the window. "What are you doing here in the dark?" I managed a smile as they entered. "Just tidying up a bit." Lost track of time. "How thoughtful." Diana smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "Though really, dear, you shouldn't worry about cleaning. We can manage our own space." I made small talk for a few minutes, my skin crawling as I noticed how Diana's eyes kept darting to the clock camera, checking if I'd spotted it. Finally, I made my excuse about needing to pick up Lucy. Once in my car, I called my closest friend and attorney, Maria Santos. "I need you to come over first thing tomorrow," I said quietly, "and bring someone who knows about surveillance equipment." Maria didn't ask questions, just promised to be there at 8 a.m. I spent the night alternating between rage and disbelief, reviewing every interaction with my in-laws through this new, horrifying lens. The next morning, I sent Lucy to school early for soccer practice, then waited for Maria. She arrived with a tall, serious man she introduced as Jack Torres, a private investigator specializing in digital surveillance. "Show us everything," Maria said. We went through the guest house while Richard and Diana were at their weekly therapy appointment, an irony that wasn't lost on me. Jack found not just the cameras I'd spotted, but several more, including one disturbingly close to Lucy's bedroom window. "This is sophisticated equipment," he said, carefully documenting each device. "Expensive too. Someone invested serious money in this setup." "They're claiming bankruptcy," I said. "Where did they get the funds for this?" "That's an excellent question," Maria replied, making notes. "One I think the bankruptcy court would be very interested in." Jack downloaded copies of all the video and audio files, then showed me how to secure our phones and computers against further surveillance. By the time Richard and Diana returned, we had everything we needed. "You have multiple grounds for legal action," Maria told me later at her office. "Criminal harassment, invasion of privacy, unauthorized surveillance of a minor. Not to mention potential bankruptcy fraud if they used hidden assets to purchase this equipment." "I don't want to go to court," I said firmly. "I don't want Lucy to go through that trauma. I just want them gone." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's give them a choice they can't refuse." That evening, I invited Richard and Diana to dinner at the main house. They came bearing their usual fake smiles and subtle criticisms. "Lucy's not joining us?" Diana asked, noticing only 3 place settings. "She's at her friend Emma's house," I replied, serving the pot roast they'd always complained was too pedestrian for their tastes. "I thought we should have an adult conversation." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, what about?" I took a sip of water, then carefully set down my glass. "About the cameras in your house, and the recordings you've been making of me and my daughter." The color drained from Diana's face. Richard's fork clattered against his plate. "I don't know what you're talking about," he blustered, but his eyes kept darting to the bookshelf behind me, where, I'd noticed earlier, they'd hidden yet another camera. "Let me be very clear," I said, pulling out a folder Maria had prepared. "I have documented evidence of every recording device you installed, every file you saved, every conversation you had about taking Lucy away from me." Diana started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I also have proof that you purchased this equipment after filing for bankruptcy using funds you didn't declare to the court. My lawyer finds that very interesting." "Now see here," Richard's face was turning purple. "We were only trying to protect Lucy. The way you're raising her." "The way I'm raising her," I cut in, "is exactly how her father wanted her raised. Michael chose to be a teacher instead of joining your business. He chose a simple life over your materialistic one. And he chose me to be Lucy's mother, trusting my judgment even after he was gone." "Michael didn't know what was best," Diana snapped, her mask finally cracking. "He was always too soft, too willing to settle for mediocrity. Lucy is a porter. She deserves." "Lucy," I interrupted, "is my daughter. And you have exactly 24 hours to leave my property." Richard laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You can't evict us without proper notice. We have rights." "Actually, you don't," I smiled, sliding another document across the table. "This is the guest house agreement you signed when you moved in. If you read the fine print, which I'm sure you didn't, it specifies that evidence of criminal activity on the property results in immediate termination of the living arrangement." They stared at the contract, their faces ashen. "You have 2 choices," I continued calmly. "You can leave quietly tomorrow, never contact us again, and I'll forget about pressing charges or notifying the bankruptcy court about your hidden assets. Or you can fight me, in which case I'll use every resource I have to ensure you face the full legal consequences of your actions." "You wouldn't," Diana whispered. "We're family. Family doesn't secretly record children. Family doesn't plot to steal someone's daughter. Family doesn't try to destroy a child's confidence because she doesn't fit their superficial standards." I stood up, gathering the documents. 24 hours. Choose wisely. They left the next morning before dawn, taking only their clothes and personal items, leaving behind their precious antiques and the expensive surveillance equipment. I had everything documented by Jack and Maria. then donated the furniture to a women's shelter and turned the cameras over to the police. Lucy was upset at first, not understanding why her grandparents had left so suddenly. I waited until she was older, almost 13, before telling her the whole story. "They wanted to take me away from you?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They thought they knew better than everyone else," I explained, holding her close. "They couldn't accept that there are many different ways to be successful and happy in life." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Dad wouldn't have let them win, would he?" "No, sweetheart. Your father believed that true success meant being true to yourself, not living up to someone else's expectations." Richard and Diana tried to reach out a few times over the years, sending birthday cards to Lucy with hints about reconciliation. I returned them all unopened. Eventually, they stopped trying. We heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to Florida, living in a modest condo and telling anyone who listened about their ungrateful daughter-in-law who turned their granddaughter against them. Sometimes I wondered if they ever understood the magnitude of what they'd done, or if they were still convinced they'd been right. Last week, Lucy had her high school graduation. As I watched my beautiful, confident daughter accept her diploma, captain of the soccer team, straight A student, and accepted to Michael's alma mater with a full scholarship, I thought about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't found those cameras. "Mom," Lucy called out after the ceremony, running to hug me in her cap and gown. "Did you see? I did it." "Your dad would be so proud of you," I said, holding her tight. "So proud of exactly who you are." Later that night, I found Lucy in her living room, looking at old photos of Michael. "Do you think the Porters ever really loved Dad?" she asked suddenly. "Or was he just another possession to them, something to shape into their idea of perfection?" I sat down beside her, looking at Michael's smiling face in his teaching photos. "I think I love their idea of him just like I love their idea of you. But real love means accepting people for who they are, not who you want them to be." Lucy nodded, then grinned, that same bright, unreserved smile she'd inherited from her father. "Well, I'm glad we're not Porters anymore. Mitchell is a much better name for a future mechanical engineer anyway." I laughed, remembering Diana's horror when Lucy had announced her intention to study engineering instead of something more suitable for a young lady. The next morning, I found a package on our doorstep, a graduation gift from Richard and Diana, according to the return address. Inside was an expensive piece of jewelry and a letter full of manipulative hints about family legacy and second chances. Lucy took one look at it and dropped it in the donation box without a second thought. "Come on, Mom," she said, grabbing her soccer ball. "Let's go practice. I want to be ready for the university team tryouts." As I watched her on the field, her face glowing with joy and determination, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led me to check the guest house that night. Sometimes the greatest act of love is protecting someone from toxic family, even when that family comes with a prestigious name and designer clothes. "Money changes everything," Michael used to say, but he was only partly right. What really changes everything is the courage to choose love over appearances, truth over pretense, and the messy reality of being yourself over the polished facade of being what others expect. Lucy scored a goal and turned to wave at me, her smile outshining the sun. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that Michael would have approved of every choice I made.